My name is Sophie. I'm standing in the cold parking lot of the funeral home, the silence broken only by the occasional car passing by. Inside, my father's funeral is in full swing, but I can't bring myself to go back in. Just a few minutes ago, in front of 31 relatives, my mother raised her glass and toasted my sister Lily. To the only daughter who was actually there for him, she said, looking straight at Lily and smiling as if I was invisible. 3 long years I spent taking care of my father, bathing him, changing his sheets at 3 a.m. Holding his head when he choked on water. And Lily? She visited exactly twice. Then, my mother slid an envelope across the table. $2,000 for your trouble, she said loudly, so everyone could hear. You can go now. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. Instead, I placed my phone on the table, turned the volume all the way up, and hit play. Lily lunged for it, but it was too late. My father's voice at 2:14 a.m. Tore through the silent room, shattering the lies that had been built over the years. But let me take you back a few years to understand how we got here. It all started in a neurologist's office in the heart of Boston. I was 28, a preschool teacher at Elmwood Preschool, loving my job and my life. My father, Robert, was a kind-hearted man, a retired mechanic who had always been there for me. One April day, we sat in that office, facing the doctor, Dr. Harris. Dr. Harris had a large, framed poster of the brain on his wall, which I stared at as he explained my father's condition. Lewy body dementia with Parkinsonian features, he said. It's progressive, degenerative, and there's no cure. He used the word trajectory as if he was describing a flight path, but it felt more like a death sentence. My father sat in the exam chair, wearing his old denim jacket, his eyes fixed on the wall behind the doctor. He didn't ask any questions. My mother, Helen, sat beside me, her arms crossed, her purse on her lap, her face expressionless. She didn't cry, didn't reach for my father's hand. When Dr. Harris finished speaking, she turned to me. Well, somebody has to take care of him, she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. I don't know why I nodded. Maybe it was because I was used to solving problems at work, or maybe it was because I couldn't bear to say no to my father sitting right there in front of me. Or perhaps it was because I'd always been the obedient daughter, saying yes to my mother my whole life. Within 3 weeks, I went part-time at work. 6 weeks later, I gave up my cozy apartment near the park, the one with the balcony where I loved to read on sunny afternoons, and moved back into my childhood bedroom. It was like stepping back in time, with the same twin bed, the faded poster of a unicorn on the wall, and the view of the backyard where my father had built me a treehouse when I was a kid. My mother called it coming home, but it felt more like being trapped. However, the first day I helped my father stand up from his recliner, the first day I crushed his pills and mixed them into applesauce, he reached over and took my hand. He squeezed it gently and looked at me with those warm, familiar eyes. Thank you, sweetheart, he said, his voice clear and steady. I sat in my car afterward and cried, not because I was sad, but because I knew I was doing the right thing. Little did I know, that would be the last time he held my hand. My mother took on the logistics. She cooked dinner, answered the phone when relatives called, and organized things. But she never changed a sheet, never sat through a 2 a.m. tremor episode when my father's body would go rigid and his jaw would clench so hard I could hear his teeth. I had to hold his head in my lap until it passed. She had a way of making me feel like I was the only one who could do this. You're so much better at this than I am, honey, she'd say, stirring something on the stove. Your father trusts you. He doesn't want strangers touching him. And Lily would just fall apart if she had to do this. She's not as strong as you. It sounded like a compliment, but it was a cage. I never hired help because she made it seem like love should be enough. I never asked Lily to come because she said Lily was too fragile. And I never left because she said only I could do it. I built a routine. At 6 a.m., I'd give my father his medication, check his vitals, and help him to the bathroom. At 7, I'd give him a sponge bath, put on fresh clothes, and apply lotion to the dry patches on his skin. At 8, it was breakfast oatmeal with raisins and a glass of milk. Every 2 hours, I'd reposition him to prevent bed sores. Afternoons were for range of motion exercises I'd learned from an online video. Evenings were for dinner, medication, teeth brushing, and then it was time for bed. I slept on a pull-out couch in the room next to his, my phone on the nightstand, the volume turned all the way up. But then, slowly, my father started turning his face away from me. It didn't happen all at once. It crept in over weeks, maybe a couple of months after I moved back. When I fed him his morning oatmeal, he'd turn his head towards the wall. When I wiped his chin, his eyes would squeeze shut. When I said, "Dad, look at me," he'd stare out of the window as if he was lost in another world. The doctors had warned me about personality changes, emotional withdrawal, agitation, paranoia, and hallucinations. They said the Lewy bodies were disrupting his brain's emotional processing. I told myself it was the disease, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Lily lived in Miami. She was a successful real estate agent, always busy with her high-end clients. She had a penthouse apartment with a view of the ocean, a fancy sports car, and a boyfriend who took her on exotic vacations. She was 26, and in the 3 years I took care of our father, she visited exactly twice. The first time, she flew in on a Wednesday without telling me. My mother picked her up from the airport, bought a bouquet of red roses, and cooked a big steak dinner. I came out of my father's room after a long, difficult day. He'd had a bad episode of choking, and I was still shaken. When I found Lily in the living room, she was all made up, her hair perfectly styled, holding the roses like a beauty queen. "Daddy," she said, leaning over him with her phone in her hand. "I'm so sorry I haven't been here more." She stayed for a few hours, crying once when she hugged him and once when she took a selfie with him. She posted it on social media with the caption, "Family time. Nothing matters more." Then she went out for drinks with an old friend. I went back to cleaning up the mess in my father's room. That evening, my mother stood in the kitchen doorway and said, "Lily came all the way from Miami, Robert. That's love." The roses sat on the dining table for a few days, then wilted. Nobody threw them out, so I did. After Lily flew back, she sent me a text message. "Thanks for being there, sis. I know it's not easy. You're amazing." I read it over and over again, thinking it was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in a long time. A couple of months after Lily's first visit, I started to notice some strange things. My mother always got to the mailbox first, no matter what. One Saturday, I was up early because my father had a bad night, and I saw her at the mailbox in her bathrobe. She pulled out a stack of envelopes, shuffled through them, and tucked 2 into her robe pocket before going back inside. The rest she left on the counter, already opened. I asked her about it over breakfast. "What were those envelopes, Mom?" She didn't look up from her newspaper. "Junk, honey. Credit card offers. You know how it is." I didn't press it. I was too tired to fight. But over the next few weeks, I noticed more letters from banks and a law firm. I asked her about my father's finances, who was paying the mortgage, and who was handling the medical bills. She sat down her coffee cup with a thud. "Don't worry about that, honey. Your father set everything up years ago. I'm handling it." I checked my bank account one morning while she was at church. I had only $750 left. Part-time preschool pay was barely enough to cover my gas, phone bill, and the supplies I needed for my father. I was living in a house I didn't pay rent on, but I was slowly running out of money. I had no lease, no savings, and no apartment to go back to. I was trapped, not by locks, but by exhaustion, love, and my mother's manipulations. Around the same time, my phone started dying overnight. I'd plug it in before bed, but every morning, it would be dead. I bought a new cable, tried different outlets, but nothing worked. I thought the battery was going bad, but I couldn't afford a new phone. So, I started using the kitchen timer as my alarm. One afternoon in October, I was reading a story to my father from an old book he loved. He had what the doctors called a lucid interval. His hands stopped shaking, his eyes cleared, and he looked at me. "Sophie," he said, his voice different, steady. "What did you mean when you wrote that?" I stopped mid-sentence. "Wrote what, Dad?" He stared at me, as if he was trying to figure something out. My mother appeared in the doorway. "Robert, you need to rest, honey. Don't tire yourself out." She guided me out of the room, saying, "He's confused. The disease does that." But the question haunted me. What did he mean? I hadn't written him anything. I told myself he was confused, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. As the months went by, things got worse for my father. The tremors became more frequent, and the lucid moments became fewer. 11 days before he died, he called my name. It was clear, not a mumble. "Sophie," he said, and I was by his side in an instant. He was propped up on his pillows, his eyes open. "I'm sorry," he said. I knelt beside the bed and took his hand. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Dad." He looked at me for a long time, then turned his face to the wall. I held his hand for a long time, but he didn't squeeze back. He died quietly in his sleep on a Friday morning. I was on the pull-out couch when I noticed the silence. The rhythmic rasp of his breathing that I'd grown so used to was gone. I walked into his room and checked his pulse. Nothing. I called the hospice nurse, who arrived and confirmed it. My mother arrived 20 minutes later, all dressed up, already on the phone with the funeral home. Lily FaceTimed, sobbing. I should have been there. I held the phone and said nothing. The next morning, I stripped his bed. As I lifted the mattress corner, a small black flip phone slid out. It was the phone my father had used before he got a smartphone. I'd thought it was gone. The battery was dead, but I found an old charger in the nightstand. After a few hours, the screen glowed, and I opened it with shaking hands. The contacts list had 3 numbers, my mother, Lily, and me. I went to the voice memos and found one recording. The timestamp was 2:14 a.m. 3 weeks before he died. I pressed play, and my father's voice filled the room. "Sophie," he said, followed by a long pause. Then he started crying. "I read what you wrote. If you hate me that much, why do you even come?" I sat on the bare mattress, playing the recording over and over again. I'd never written him anything, but he believed I had. I transferred the recording to my phone and put the flip phone in my glove compartment. At the funeral, after my mother's toast and the envelope with the $2,000, I played the recording. Lily's face went white, and she lunged for my phone, but it was too late. My mother tried to dismiss it, saying my father was confused at the end. But I knew there was more to it. I walked outside, got in my car, and opened the text message thread on my father's phone saved under my name. The first message was from about 2 years ago. "I'm only doing this because no one else will. Don't confuse this with love." I scrolled through the messages, each one more hurtful than the last. They were all sent between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. and they all came from my phone number. I started reading my father's replies. "I don't understand what changed. I thought you loved me. Your mother says you're doing your best. Why do your texts say different?" It was clear that he'd asked my mother about the messages, and she'd given him that ambiguous answer. I realized that my mother had been taking my phone every night, unlocking it with the passcode I'd given her for emergencies, typing these messages to my father, and deleting them from my outbox. The battery drain every morning was because of her. I drove back to my father's house and confronted my mother. I set the flip phone on the counter. "Tell me about these messages, Mom." She looked at the phone and started crying. "I was trying to protect you, honey. Your father was saying terrible things about you. I didn't want you to hear them, so I made it look like you didn't care." I didn't believe her. "Why would you also send him messages making him think I hated him?" Her face changed, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. I was confused. It was all so hard. I held up the phone. The first fake text was sent 6 months after his diagnosis. He was fine then. He could still take care of himself. "You did this when he could understand every word." She had no answer. I picked up the flip phone and walked out the door. She called after me, "Sophie, we're family. Don't do anything you'll regret." But I knew I couldn't let this go. I called Uncle Tom. "Did Dad change his will?" There was a long pause. "He did. About 10 months ago. He left the house and the savings account to Lily. He said you told him you didn't want it." I told him I never sent that text, that my mother sent it from my phone while I slept. I also found out that Lily knew about it. After my father changed his will, she'd called Uncle Tom, saying, "Dad finally made the right decision. Sophie doesn't even want the house." I decided to expose the truth. I sent an email to all our relatives, attaching screenshots of the fake texts, the battery drain data from my phone, and the recording. I invited them to Uncle Tom's house to hear the full story. On the day of the gathering, 14 people came. My mother showed up uninvited. She tried to defend herself, saying my father was confused at the end. But when I played the recording and showed the screenshots, the truth became clear. Uncle Tom said he'd contact the attorney about the will. Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister, shook her head in disbelief. Many of our relatives stopped speaking to my mother. It's been 3 months since then. I've found a small 1-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. I've gone back to teaching full-time at the preschool. My students don't know what I've been through. They just know Miss Sophie is back, and I bring them stickers and read them stories every day. I keep my father's old flip phone in my nightstand drawer. Not as evidence, because the attorney has copies of everything. I keep it because on the quiet nights, when I think about all the things that happened, I open it and play the recording. Just the first word, Sophie. It's his voice, saying my name in the dark, and it makes me feel like he's still here, still loving me. The most dangerous person in your life isn't the one who hates you. It's the one who controls what the people you love believe about you. My father loved me, and even though he died not knowing that, I know it now. And I'll make sure the truth is never buried again.